Sir, the situation is similar to that of last week. A 20-year-old male plunged into the green bin. According to his wife, he blacked out the instant he landed. Though he's still on top, we are concerned about what will occur once he regains his consciousness.
I lowered my spectacles as I pushed the enormous glinting red button underneath my workstation. As I dumped the heap of documents on my table, it blasted a loud enough siren throughout the main hall of the facility to rouse the dowsing personnel.
Make room for the runway!
We hustled toward our trucks, puffing as we strapped our gear on. Every start we made, we checked our timepieces to try to ensure we were on track. Such circumstances must not be taken lightly. Death may happen in a matter of seconds. The sirens hollered throughout the busy streets and freeways. The vehicle, accelerating rapidly than its purported capability.
So, what happened?
One of our relatively close co-workers, Argon, who got the call, threw out a faint sneer. Before speaking, he gestured an apology, seeing the unnerving expression plastered across our faces. He sometimes had an odd and uncomfortable humor that, I bet, often led him to trouble. He cleared his throat and continued.
His wife said he peered from the beanstalk, which was doubled his stature to well investigate something. He suddenly slipped, colliding into the clump over his head and collapsing within.
The rest of the team groaned.
Fox claimed that he heard noises inside and phoned him to inspect, and they were in the same predicament as everyone else.
This was the 30th time such a case had transpired, with 50% of the concluding with fatalities. The overwhelming bulk of those who perished were children, and witnessing their hapless parents shattered our hearts. My men caught my disconcerting demeanor as I tightened my fist.
Sorry, sir. I didn't intend to bring up much unpleasant memories.
Don't be, I urged, patting his shoulders to indicate assurance. When we made an appearance on the scene, we found the wife kneeling, anxious and weeping.
Lord, please spare my husband, please.
A bunch of medics from an ambulance that had arrived with us managed to calm the wife. My crew spared little time and began climbing the bin's ladder, hauling their equipment after them. They flashed a signal prior to actually heading in.
Still passed out. I'll head on first.
After assessing the situation inside, they leaped inside one another after another, hurling stepping rocks against the grain. Another group stationed at the bin's downstream part, poised to excavate an executive and constraint arose within. They fastened themselves around the bin's mouth and donned a buckle around their waistlines for assistance. In case they toppled over, the one was still motionless, and the simple truth that a wee half-body-sized metal panel had descended with him was the primary reason he didn't appear to perish the green pile. It functioned as a wrap for his body, preventing him from plummeting.
All right, let's...
The guy awoke just as my colleague was about to issue an order.
He's up and about. Hold your horses, sir. we're about to.
They couldn't even finish as the guy suddenly jumped up. He dove into the green, at the same time sinking before he could even rise to his knees. It just took a fraction of a second for half of his body to be submerged.
Sir, take a deep breath and remain still. Toss me the shields.
The crew resolved to encapsulate the person with metal columns, making a polygon around the individual.
Hey, what the hell is going on? Where exactly am I?
It took the man a moment of processing before adding another cry.
Oh God, I don't want to die yet, please.
Mashka handed the guy a vest that was attached to a pull-up device along the unit's cable framework. It served as his handrail in being hauled up. They generated a vacuum inside, drawing the gains out of the section where the guy was entrapped. After installing all the metal barriers,
Don't worry, sir. We will get you out of there.
the grains within the barrier were diminishing, and the pressure around the guy's body appeared to ease. But the man's below, just as we believed, everything was going according to plan. He grumbled and began to paint a variety of expression on his face, encompassing agony, perplexity, and panic. Argon was the first to notice it, and gave Mashka a signal by patting her on the back.
Sir, something is tugging at my feet.
Mashka gave the man a sidelong glance. She stopped the procedure by flipping off the machine and detaching her headgear.
Sorry? You didn't quite get it.
Something is dragging on. Something is dragging on my. What's going on in there? Are those screams I hear?
We heard reverberations of moans and excessive noise inside from underneath, together with the individuals at the base of the pin. I then radioed them, demanding details, but no one responded. We could only hear a terrible wails booming over the field. Outside, my coworkers gazed at me, awaiting my signal.
What the hell is going on, Argon?
The hell's tremors both came from the standstill for a brief period of quietness. Then there was a skyrocketing rumble, and the entire beam began to shake. I heard a rustling, huffing, and muffled whimpering from the radio after only a few seconds.
He's taking a dive. He's being dragged down by something.
What are you talking about? There's no void. The machine has been switched off.
It isn't the machine, sir. Rip this bin open now.
It was the first time I heard Argon in such a tone of voice, and it conveyed a genuine dread coupled with conflicting emotions. Why did the sound of his shriek give me vertigo? My pulse rate quickened, and I knew from the back of my mind that all this, too, would underperform. Got it open! I screamed from the depths of my head, trying to pull my thoughts together. With their circular saws, my guys began puncturing the metallic walls of the bin, producing a vast hole for the guy to flee through. Anxious to see yet another lifeless body in front of me, I broke out in a cold sweat. They skillfully sanctioned the surface and peeled its portion wide, unleashing a mound of brains. When fresh crimson blood-colored granules began to appear, our faces changed dramatically. The grains continued to stream down after we paved the fat. We couldn't detect the man, So we remained till every grain was released. He's nowhere to be found. I don't think I saw him come out.
He is not inside the bin, sir.
Argon and his mates exclaimed as they dashed down the rails and began scurrying among the grains. I peered through the opening hole and saw the most horrible image I'd ever seen. The bin reeked like something was decomposing as the blackish substance dripped from the ceiling and walls. The odor was just too much for me to take, and I felt like throwing up. The searing feeling brought tears to my eyes. Blood was streaming from the edges, the bin's bottom, and the grains themselves. The interior of the bin appeared as if a can of red paint had exploded, smearing both of the walls.
He is not here.
Argon whispered. I took a step back and swung around to find him fumbling around on the ground, his eyes wide, his fists clenched, and his body shaking. Mashka followed, murmuring inaudible praises, then dropped and began shaking as if she were undergoing a muscle spasm. She winked as her whole body began to shudder, bubbles bursting from her mouth, and I caught myself grimacing, baffled by the set of the circumstances. We stood motionless, clueless to the bizarre events unfolding around us. The medics then hurried Mashka into the ambulance, where she was sent off to a nearby hospital. Argon burst into muted tears and laughter out of nowhere. My other co-workers were already displaying indication of frustration as he mumbled praises we didn't quite comprehend. We had no idea what was going on with them, enough that he yelled at the top of his lungs before dropping out on the ground. I instructed the subsequent team to head back and seek for the man's body by leveling the mound. I had no idea what happened, so we kept looking for the man's body. This time, the police arrived, along with the removal crew to take care of the situation.
It's nowhere to be found, sir. There's no trace of the man's body, and nothing except his blood has been recovered.
Hearing her remarks made me nauseous, not because of the strange scenario, but because of the vibe. I felt sick to my stomach and couldn't say anything, so I just nodded. I was crushed, simply witnessing how distraught she was by the news, since the wife looked to have lost her mind. She collapsed to her knees and began yelling.
No, 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 please don't.
She was accompanied by the police, who consoled her shattered heart. Argon had awoken this time. As I passed through the greens, he was sitting beside the ambulance.
It devoured him.
I came to complete halt in the middle of my path. I turned my head in his way and found him gazing at me straight in the eyes. I had no idea what was wrong with him, but this look made me shudder.
It ate him. Something ate him.
I groaned and ran my hand through my hair. I know the circumstances might occasionally be the scenes that made us question our sanity. My steps were heavy for the first time in my life as I neared him. I know that surprised people, but it's impossible. The
I
machine.
told you, it wasn't the machine. There was something in there.
He leaped up and gripped the collar of my suit as he stood up. He continued to shout inaudible and unintelligible praises while pointing in the direction of the bin. Cops apprehended him and dragged him away, As he wailed, strapping him back into the ambulance stretcher so that he wouldn't jump out. I caressed my throat and trembled slightly.
Are you alright, sir?
One of the officers inquired. I merely nodded and walked back to our vehicle. Argan's action prompted a knowing concern in my head. This was without a doubt our most disastrous operation in our years of services. We abandoned the situation to the authorities while they conducted their investigations. Things remained mysterious, but we didn't meddle much. When we came back, we felt sluggish. No one cared to converse, and everyone appeared fatigued. The next few days were bleak. All of a sudden, Argan straight up resigned along with the other employees who were with them. Mashka remained at the hospital, and the rest of the crew who witnessed the entirety of the incident were moved to an institution where they spent their days recovering. I felt terrible for what they had gone through, but more so for being apologetic in general. I know they saw something because of their reactions, but I can't get myself to believe it. What might have caused that man's vanishing, or should I say demise? If I could only put my finger on it. Following this tragedy, I began to experience migraines, and I found myself wondering, could this possibly be the cause of my father's death? I awoke feverish and struggling to breathe. I had a nightmare involving the incident we just had. Something so overbearing and dreadful took shape from the silo. It's protruding my eyes, scolding at my entire existence. It rumbled like an animal, as if it was struggling to engage with me in a way I didn't fully understand. My wife comforted me as soon as she realized what was going on, and I assured her I was alright and headed downstairs to get some water while she slept. The shivered and foreboding that had gripped me initially during that day decided to continue to slither up my spine as the week sped. I've always wanted to pay a visit to some of my coworkers, particularly Argan and Mashka, but every time I did, they didn't even give me a second glance. They'd fix their glance on something and continue to mumble unintelligible sentences despite smiling and responding to their soothing methodologies. I groaned as I took a massive swallow of water, aching my throat. My heart was beating harder than it had in the former. I set the glass down and wiped my face, and there it was when I happened to look through the window in front of me. Outside my home, in the shadows, I recognized the bloodshot orbs from my dream. It found me and was waiting for me outside, tormenting me. I could hardly move as my heartbeat was hammering furiously. I could envision that creature grinning as it watched me in terror if I were fully sensible. It slid from its original position as I was racing back to our bed, frightened for myself and my wife. Its eyes would get broader, and it would continue to advance at a slightly slower pace. I watched its elongated arm-like structure slither into the limelight from the barely perceptible illumination of the lamp post, exposing a horrendous image of an atrocious topped creature. It blew the streets light out, completely obscuring the entire neighborhood. I made a lunge when I finally had the courage to move. I rushed up to my sleeping wife and aroused her from her slumber. She mumbled.
What's up?
as I coaxed her to her feet and prompted her to follow me, even though she was still in a daze. I remember my dad during that brief period of attempting to flee. My father began to serve as a fireman when I was a child, when an episode concerning individuals plunging into silos occurred once, and he and his suit unit were dispatched to assess. He returned home completely different person. I recall him babbling out ghastly details and like turning from a highly regarded gentleman to a wretch demented chap in the blink of an eye. We were jolted awake one night by a shriek, just to discover his lifeless body outside our lawn. And it lingered to me, the things he would often tell me about, like the horrors that he encountered, but I was too young to embrace such reality. From the kitchen, we strolled to the back door, which led to the driveway where the car was parked. My wife insisted on knowing what was going on, and I just reassured her that someone was there. She appeared bewildered, with a worried expression on her face. I provided her one more affirmation before a commotion from the inside spurred me to drive the car without thinking. We settled into a hotel for the night, and I started telling her that we had to flee because somebody was threatening to kill us. If I told her the truth, she'd think I was insane, and my reason seemed convincing. When I called the cops to report a break-in, they came to me with much unfathomable news that our house has unimaginably vanished, as if totaled by a hurricane. Picture the scene where, like one part of a sequence domino has been taken out, like a missing part of a puzzle. My wife was distraught, and she was on the brink of going mad, as she couldn't imagine how it could happen. The cops were unable to come up with an explanation and simply resumed their investigations. I was to go mad as well, but the house missing was the last from the list. We made the decision to reside with our folks until we could get our affairs in order. Every night that came, I was petrified to death because I knew it was out there, searching for me. 3 days after this happened, I received the tragic news that Argan had died of unknown cause. Mashka also suffered a stroke and was unlikely to be able to wake up. As the day progressed, the entire team who had been inside the bin that day began to perish, and I had a feeling that we'd be next. To whomever may read this or listening to this, I'm penning my final words. As the nights draw closer, I feel dread engulfing me once again. I know it's right beyond our front door, merely collecting the fear building up inside me. I apologize in advance to everyone as well, because I've recently discovered that it hunts for a reason. Anyone who has even the slightest inkling of its existence is doomed to perish.
I'm coming closer. I will catch you. The time it goes tick tock, tick tock, tick. You are unprepared. I would swear you are pretty scared. It is like a magic show, and